In this video, we'll discuss the features on Jeff Bezos' face that point to a potentially two-faced nature, as well as a capacity for strong willpower. Enjoy. In today's face reading video, we're looking at Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO of Amazon. A lot of people had asked that I read Jeff Bezos. He does have some very interesting features. Two primary key dominant features that leap out to me. There is a third and a fourth, and I would say the third is not as dominant as the first two, and the fourth is noticeable, but only from profile. So we'll go through all of these things. But if you're new to my channel, welcome. But please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. Face reading is a branch of Chinese medicine, and there are some terms and terminology I may use in this video, and if you haven't watched that orientation video, you might be a bit lost. So please go watch that if you're new. The dominant features on Jeff Bezos, the big ones, the eyes and the ears. The third dominant is the eyebrows, but not as dominant as the first two. And the last one is his nose, which relates to the midlife, but he's got a strong dominant nose, especially from profile. When we see that topographical elevation from the face, because face reading says that the face is a roadmap. It's a map of your life, but it's also a landform of sorts. A landform of your life terrain, how it unfolds to a degree. So, all of it being said, let's talk about his eyes. You'll notice in this picture that Jeff Bezos' eye, his left eye is larger, the right eye is smaller. If you look at other pictures of him, you'll see this. It's consistent. Now, is it like that in every picture? No. There are some pictures where he's doing this and both eyes are kind of open. There are some where he's smiling and both eyes are evenly sedate. But in a lot of the pictures, you'll see this discrepancy between the left and the right. So this brings us to the left and right sides of the face. Face reading is underpinned by Yin-yang theory because it's a branch of Chinese medicine. Yin-yang theory is at the core of a lot of this stuff. It's about balance, right? Rest and activity, birth and death, man and woman. All of these cycles in nature are present. So balance is good, but sometimes when we see these asymmetries, that means in relation to the left and right sides of the face, the public persona, who Jeff Bezos is to the public and who he is behind closed doors, are likely pretty different. Now, this is something that happens, I think, with people who make a lot of money and who have global impact. When we do that, making money, turning a profit at that scale and at those numbers, there's probably going to be some levers that he's got to pull that aren't the best, right? Sometimes people are, you hear about these reports about, Amazon and workers not being treated as well as they could be. So with that, it makes a certain amount of sense. We're seeing this discrepancy. When we see this from the face reading standard, from the theory, sort of says that this can lead to a two-faced nature. Two-faced isn't always bad. When we think of Two-Face, we think of the villain, or at least I do because I'm a comic book nerd, but I think about Two-Face from the Batman series. And you think about this, someone who's two-faced is you can't trust him. That doesn't necessarily mean that. Balance is good in the East, but the thing you have to remember is that a lot of people, when they do big things or they work very hard, sometimes they're very imbalanced to get there. People will sacrifice spending and live very much below their means for a long period of time and really keep that scale low while they're building their empire or doing things. That's not technically balanced. It can bring balance later, but going after fitness goals, sometimes people are going to be hyper aggressive to lose a lot of weight. Not technically balanced, but again, hopefully over time these things settle. The other thing with face reading is when you see this, I can't look at his eyes and say, this means explicitly this about him. That's not how it works. I tell people to look at the broad concepts first, the big ideas, and then look how the person is living. See if you can find from that point congruency between their life terrain and their facial features. And this is sort of how you learn face reading. This is how you, excuse me, allergies a little bit from the spring weather here. So keep that in mind, okay? Do that thing when you're looking at faces. Take the big ideas first and then cross-reference with theory and then let that sort of inform you about the person to a degree. Because again, face reading is not meant to be psychic or predictive. It's about establishing features in relation to theory and noticing large-scale patterns that happened over thousands of years, through face reading research, and then seeing if there's congruency, and then a person's life terrain can be augmented and shaped accordingly. So with that, I would be asking him questions if he were my lifestyle client about what's his experience with what he does in the public world and behind closed doors, and how much conflict is he experiencing because of that. Because if he is, that can be remediated, but that is something that I would be talking to him about. Now, his ears, dominant. They're big. When you look at his face, the things that leap out, I would say his face is kind of homogeneous, except for the eyes and the ears. Those two things leap out. Those are the big dominant things. So the eyes are the gateway to the soul, right? So we're going to see this a little bit of difference between the consciousness and how it expresses because of those eye shapes. Those are different. And then large ears. I've said before that large ears are a water element feature. They relate to the kidney system. They also relate to risk taking. Now, a lot of times people will see big ears and they'll think of risk taking in the physical sense, like skydiving or being a police officer. But it can also show up in a lot of other ways. I guarantee you Bezos has taken some risks along the way. He's probably made some sizable leaps and invested more than he probably should have in certain things for a very real big payoff. So with big ears, we're going to see some risk taking. These are things that I would be talking to him about and saying, you're likely wired for some risk taking. Be careful to not overuse that. But big ears also relate to big kidney energy. Kidney is where the seat of the willpower sits. So the kidneys and all of the organ systems store and digest certain emotions, but they also hold and house certain emotional rhythms that we can express. The water element, the kidney system, relates to willpower. So it's about, they call it zhi, spelled Z-H-I in Chinese, the willpower to pursue, the willpower to get something done. There's some crossover with the wood element because the wood element has drive in there, but will is about the underpinning. It's the I'm going to get this done from the mental place. The actual action and doing it is actually more of wood. So in any case, large ears, big and dominant. And with his ears, they also say with large ears, usually there's old age, good luck, especially with fleshy earlobes. So this is a surplus when you have I have pretty fleshy earlobes. Jeff Bezos does too. What they say about this is sort of like a surplus of yin, or the fluid in the body and in the kidney system, which means as you get older, there can be good luck. Things go well for you later in life. So, auspicious and good for Jeff Bezos. Now, he's got moderately dominant eyebrows. He doesn't have an excessively dominant jaw. That's the root system of the wood element, but the eyebrows are sort of the upper expression of the wood element, and it has to do with the creativity and expression and the things that we're chasing and that we're pursuing, how much they need to be expressed into the world. So his eyebrows, again, not dominant, but noticeable for sure. So again, these are wood metrics that I would be touching on in relation to his life terrain and talking to him about it. Now, the last piece here is his nose. So if you look at it from profile, it's dominant. It stands out. He's got what they call, by definition from the face reading standard and from the face reading theory, a trailblazer nose. So when the nose is dominant from profile and it protrudes and it stands out, that means strong midlife metrics. The 40s in particular is where a lot of the energy is going to show up because there's more mass on the face. So any place we see more mass, more form, it's said that there's more chi, there's more energy there. So, excuse me. So according to the age brackets, the nose relates to the 40s. So Jeff Bezos has done very well, but I would have to go back and look at what was happening in his 40s and see what that was like for him, but he does have a strong nose. When I was looking at his natural face, his public persona and his inner persona, when I was talking about the discrepancy in terms of who he is to the public and who he is internally, you can see it here in the facial expressions. There's something in the inner persona, and I say this lightly, I don't mean this literally. There's something kind of sociopathic about it. Like there's this kind of bug-eyed, hey, it has that little bit of vibe of like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings and from The Hobbit, where it's like, my precious, there's definitely like this pursuit, and there's something going on in the inner persona that's like hunting for gold, essentially. That was the vibe I got, and I could be connecting the dots because I know he's a billionaire, but there's something about the inner persona that has that beady-eyed, ready to go, ready to chase. So the inner persona, again, I would be asking him about that, like what's his terrain like in the internal, in his own life, behind closed doors. The public persona is the CEO. That really looks like the guy who's like the front man for the business. The calm, more sedate, more professional. The inner persona is like, I'm hungry and I'm ready to chase something. So again, who knows how he's actually expressing these things, but these are metrics that I would be looking at in relation to face reading, because in the end, if I identify these things and I see these looks on a person's face, again, I'm not here to be psychic or predictive. I'm saying, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is the vibe that comes from it. This is what the Shen says. What's your experience of yourself? And then what's your relationship to the public persona and inner persona? So if any of you have had a face reading from me, and I'm always offering face readings if anyone wants one, just message me on my website. If you had a face reading with me, what I'll say to people is, I'll do this with your face, and I'll say, who would you rather have tea or a beer with or a cup of coffee with? Which face do you like better and why? Is there conflict? Your relationship to these two faces, if I was doing this for you, is very important, because if you have a strong aversion to one, that's internal conflict. You have to realize that the public persona and inner persona are essentially two expressions of your personality, two characters in your life that are living and doing their thing. And the game is not to hate or dislike one or the other. It's more about, when do I use these characters? In what context? How do I use them? When do I use them? And how do I harmonize them and optimize each of these two characters to a degree for the best result? So, in any case, that is all I've got for Jeff Bezos. If you guys have questions, comments, please put them down below. And as always, thanks for your time.